Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Zach Meckler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and we're back again today. We being me and Zach. Zach, we're making this a habit. Zach Meckler, the jack of all trades, hopefully, however, not a master of none. How you doing, my friend?
Not too bad. Just another day of Steelers glory. Looking forward to it.
Oh, by Steelers glory, do you mean picking fights on Twitter? Because if you guys aren't aware, you're not already following Zach on Twitter with some of his training camp updates as one of many boots on the ground here as far as SCU contributors. Everybody, you're like a heat magnet. People love to pick fights with you over the smallest of tweets.
Maybe it's me. I don't understand it. In my mind, I try to be a very level-headed, rational person when it comes to my social media presence. And for whatever reason, I guess I sometimes just attract some people that want to troll and want to give their 2 cents unnecessarily when I don't really care to hear it. I'm all for interacting with people, but at some point in time, stop being so downtrodden and just disheartening and just have some fun. Would you please?
That's going to be our topic today because there's not a whole heck of a lot to expand upon from our previous almost hour-long training camp show. If you missed it earlier from Monday, pretty much all the same camp darlings. There's some guys here that we'll point out real quick on, whether they've improved, whether they've not improved. And it's more or less some of the things that are going on surrounding camp, some of the things that, with certain people. But first, a couple just important show notes. For those of you who are cord cutters like myself, I have DirecTV Now, which is DirecTV's streaming package, and I get it dirt cheap because I'm an AT&T wireless customer. Okay, don't come at me if you're a Verizon person. I don't care. It's just I've had AT&T since it was singular. And because I get this so cheap, it's like I get all these channels except for NFL Network. Well, guess, lo and behold, the magic email comes to me Thursday morning ahead of all of these Hall of Fame ceremonies that they finally added NFL Network. I don't have to supplement with like another sling, whether it's a trial or I just sign up for a month just to get NFL Network for the fall. It's a huge load off of my shoulders. Are you cord cutter, Zach, by any chance, or what do you do there? You're not.
No.
You got the expensive stuff. You got like the luxury. You're the high roller. You order the lobster and the steak surf and turf when you go out. This is why people don't like you.
I guess. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons, but that might be one. Who knows?
Yeah. So some other important news, at least I guess on the Steelers front, they made some roster moves, and we went from a guy I couldn't identify the other day in camp and kept getting asked who's wearing that number to signing a guy that I know we were pretty high on heading into the NFL draft a couple of years ago. He's ping-ponged around. He's been banged up and injured. Unfortunately, he makes his way now to Pittsburgh. It is a tight end by the name of Bucky Hodges. And I'm trying to remember what all I really liked about him. I mean, he was like the 5th leading receiver in Virginia Tech history, I believe, there with the Hokies. But a decent-sized receiver who was catching high 40s, low 50s per year during his college career. How about some insight on Bucky?
Yeah, so I was a big fan of Bucky whenever he was coming out of VT in 2017. He is kind of, in my opinion, starting to be a little bit more of what we're seeing in today's modern move, swing, inline, tight end type of deal where you see him not really lining up as an attachment to the offensive line, but seeing him split in the slot, maybe seeing some packages where he's split outside wide as a wide receiver almost. The guy's 6'6", almost 260, but still somehow manages to run a sub-4.6 40, and in my mind, that's tremendous speed. It shows up on the tape whenever you watch him back from Virginia Tech. He just hasn't been able to stick in the NFL. He took a kind of surprising draft day slide in 2017. I know a lot of people had him going in the 3rd to 4th round, which is right around where I had him pegged. I had him pegged in the early 4th round. Slid all the way to the 6th round to the Vikings. Didn't really do a lot with them. He was with the Jets earlier on, right before he was with the Steelers. They let go of him. I think a lot of that has to do more so with the fact that teams need to find a way to use him. And I think the Steelers, what we're seeing now, we've seen a lot of split tight end sets where you have Vance McDonald whenever he was practicing, Jesse James, Xavier Grimble. They're all splitting up pretty much in a Z. on the far outside wide receiver, and pretty much just being let free to go and use their athleticism. I think what the Steelers are trying to do at the tight end position, Bucky Hodges is a great fit for that if they can find some level of consistency. Because right now you're not going to get a whole lot out of him as a blocker. But as a receiving threat, as a red zone threat, in last year's draft class, he was really almost second to none behind maybe like Evan Ingram when it comes to that type of tight end receiving threat. So I'm excited to see what he can do in Pittsburgh. He's far from a lock. I wouldn't be surprised if he was gone whenever the final cuts happen. But he's certainly had some interesting competition to watch as we head into the first preseason game next week.
Yeah, I do believe he's practice squad eligible. He landed on injured reserve with the Vikings his rookie year, and then he was released, went to the Panthers. He lasted a few months there and then was with the Jets for all the way up until practically a week ago, end of July. So he became available, and you gotta wonder that since no other teams really went after him, and the Steelers did, that they can maybe stash him there. Maybe he's one of those guys who kind of sits for a year. They see what they have, maybe sign to a futures contract or reserve contract, a year or two under that, and all of the stuff that comes with it, like exclusive rights, free agents, and stuff like that. He could end up being. Now, I don't want to overhype. This is going to be like the crux of this show is overhyping everything, because I'm saying we're debunking some training camp myths. When we build up some of these guys, you got to understand there's only like a handful of roster spots the Steelers really need to fill. All the rest, when we talk about locks, you got guys that are under contract, whether it be they're still on rookie deals, or you got your multi-million-dollar guys like an Antonio Brown. There's a lot of people occupying space, and not so many spaces for new guys to fill in like a Bucky Hodges. So this could be a long play should it work out for the Steelers. So I think I want to start with something that came from, 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan, and I think he was talking about Richard Sherman. You remember him, very vocal former Seattle Seahawks corner that now is playing for their in-division rival, the San Francisco 49ers, and I guess he gets beat one-on-one by Marquise Goodwin. And Shanahan has a press conference, as is customary with these coaches every day. And I'm going to try and be brief because this thing's really long. If you want to see it, I tweeted it out earlier on the Steel City Underground account. And, Shanahan says, I just use it as example. I mean, you guys have to put yourself in these players' shoes. We didn't used to get reports on stats on practices, and I don't get the reports and judge our guys off of them, but you tell everyone to ignore them, but I guarantee people hear it. Their wives hear it. Someone hears it. Jimmy's, meaning Garoppolo, completion percentage every day, how many picks he threw, and I just try to put myself in the player's shoes. And he's talking about training camp. He's talking about all of these repetitions. You got people marking down when somebody gets beat, somebody misses a tackle, someone throws an incompletion or a pick, and he continues with this. You're going to go out, try and practice and get better and stuff, trying new things, stuff you don't always do in games, and you're getting reports on stuff that you had a bad completion percentage or you can't do this, and that stuff worries me for players because now I'm afraid they're going to go out there and be like, man, I know you want me to try this new thing, but I don't want this to go viral for the next week. I don't want people to say, oh, I can't throw this type of ball, and then they don't get better and they just try to survive the day so they could please people who don't really know what they're working on. And he should really say they don't know what they're talking about too, and that could even include me and you, Zach, because a lot of times when we look at these things and you say, oh, well, so-and-so gets beat in practice, we don't know all the time an assignment. We're taking a guess as to what the defense or the offense is trying to do. And some of this stuff is ad-libbed, or guys are going to do the wrong thing because they're still learning the playbook. There's 91 in the Steelers' case, since they have Christian Scotland Williamson from the UK program. They have 91 guys out there. They're only going to keep 53, and they get like another 10 on the practice squad. So, I mean, this is, Shanahan's talking about it takes a mentally strong person and not care about all that. People should just ease up a bit, blah, 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 blah. So he goes, getting better is what matters, so you could do it on Sundays. It's a good example to show young guys, to show everyone that stuff doesn't matter. And that's exactly what we're kind of talking about, because the other day we mentioned names. We mentioned Jamar Summers. We mentioned Damon Patterson. We mentioned Mason Rudolph. I almost said Mason Randolph because of our joke. Joshua Dobbs. Who else? I know I mentioned Keith Kelsey, Jesse James. We mentioned all the tight ends. We mentioned Quadri Henderson. There's all of these guys that are competing for roster spots, and you have to understand that a lot of times when we're talking about the guys that are showing up in camp, we're not talking about veterans and stuff like that. I know people have asked me about Bud Dupree or Artie Burns, or Artie Burns gets beat, and you know who he's covering? Antonio Brown. He's the GOAT, okay? He beats everybody. I may have said that the last time, but Artie, this is the iron sharpening iron thing that Mike Tomlin is so cliche in saying, and it's only going to make Artie better. So what if he gets beat by the best player in the NFL right now at his position? I would expect that to happen to everybody. If he shuts him down, then he's going to be the top corner in the league. So you got to lower, you got to make more realistic expectations. You got to realize that maybe somebody's filling in for someone else who's injured, like a BJ Finney stepping in for Ramon Foster, and you got to have realistic expectations. You got to understand who the rookies are and where their place is on the depth chart, and why exactly some guys are getting the repetitions they are and why others aren't. So, in saying that, that's why there's a term such as camp darling. And I know you're just sitting over there just waiting to interject into this. So jump right on it, Zach.
Yeah, so this is something I've always felt passionately about, not even just for the preseason, just the season in general. I'm a big proponent in when you look at the evaluation of a player, whether it's a player that we see every day that's performing at a high level like Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Hayward, or if we're looking at a guy who's fighting for a roster spot like a Quadri Henderson or like a Damon Patterson, or even Mike Hilton last year when he was anything but a lock to make the roster before he became the near bona fide slot corner that he is today. Players are people too. And I think that's something that often gets forgotten because we look at these players and they're making millions of dollars and, they, no matter what happens, they're going to be good, blah, blah, blah. They should be able to be professional and put it out of their mind. But in reality, so in today's age of social media, there's constantly people on there, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with the people that get on me. People are always out there trying to pull down other players, and just it's easy to look at the negatives. If I could pull out any single practice, I could look back at a repetition that Artie had against AB and vice versa, where Artie got beat pretty badly, but then the next play AB came around and got beat by Artie. So we're going to sit there and all of a sudden say Antonio Brown is a bad receiver? No. We're going to say Artie Burns is a bad cornerback? No, because it's a rep, and you have to look at the entire overall picture when you're doing player evaluations. Like I said, it's easy to pick out the negative stuff, but then when all you're doing on social media is you see one rep, and instantly your entire opinion has been made up about that player, saying, so-and-so shut down so-and-so on this one rep. It looks like they're finally starting to come around. And it's easy to do that because you see an exciting play, but are they going to do it consistently? And I look at a player like Damon Patterson, just because today it seems there's been a lot out there about him and a couple of drops he's had and how magnified they've been after he was this, quote, camp darling beginning on. He's still the same prospect he was before he had those drops today. They're very unfortunate drops, and you kind of are sitting there scratching your head saying, well, that's an NFL catch. You got to make it. But remember, he's a player that's a young guy. He's an undrafted free agent. He's fighting for a spot to make it on a roster, whether it be with the Steelers or auditioning for another team around the league. Like we've seen so many players that end up getting cut from the Steelers, landing someplace else. To sit here and say all of a sudden, well, he was a camp darling those first weeks, but now we're starting to see his true colors and he's had a couple drops, maybe his chances are over. That's not the case. Players like him have a little harder time and the mistakes need to be minimal, but they all of a sudden just take to social media and start bashing them apart or saying that they don't have it anymore. When they see it, their significant others see it. They have family members that see it. You can't escape social media in today's age. And these players are people too. I can't emphasize that enough. And that's why I have a routine habit whenever I make a comment about a player on Twitter, whether it be neutral, positive, or otherwise. And I'll have a follower come and just completely bash the player saying, oh, they shouldn't be in the NFL, blah, blah, blah. They suck. And, I'll quote tweet that person's tweet and at the player that they're saying it to, because if you're going to sit there behind a fake screen and say that, you should at least have the decency to say it to their face. I don't think you should anyway, but that's just the nature of it. In my mind, training camp specifically is a place where you can look at these players, see what they can do, and practice is going to always be practice. And until you see the preseason games, you can't really make these full-on evaluations about players. These roster spots are going to be made in practice, but they're going to be mainly made in the games, because that's when you're going to see the real live action in a non-controlled environment, where the players are going to be able to go and make their thing. And going back to the comment you made about us not knowing the assignments, that couldn't be any more true. I know I had a conversation with you during the season last year, and there was a play where it appeared that Artie got completely burned in coverage, to the point where, people are sitting there clamoring, saying, oh, we need to bench him. We need to look for someone else. Hopefully Cam Sutton comes back healthier, et cetera, whatever. Realistically, we don't know what the assignment was. From my eyes, it looked like it was a zone play. And from my perspective, the receiver had left Artie's zone, and the one downfall of zone defense is the fact that you have a good, competent quarterback you're playing against, and he sees the receiver leave the zone and be in transition between another one, he's going to attack it, and that's what happened. And Artie can't leave his responsibilities to go and make a play elsewhere solely because of the fact that he knows what the quarterback's going to do, because you don't. So to automatically assume that that's Artie's fault is just asinine, because you have no idea. You don't have the playbook in front of you. You don't know what their responsibilities were for that week, because they change from week to week. Their responsibilities change from week to week based upon who they're playing, what the personnel packages they plan on putting in. There's very generalized concepts you can pick up and look at a play. Well, that was a bad play, or that was a good play. But overall, you have no idea. None of us have any idea, except for the people that are on that sideline and in that football team. And beyond that, anything else is just an assumption. And too much, you see the hot hits to try to get out there and get the news out there and break it. And that's not always the case. And I'm rambling, but it's something I just.
Oh no. We've got a lot to chew on with this, because a lot of it is just the hot take type culture. It's the TMZ, the shock jock, the I need the clicks, the clickbait. There's certain things I won't stoop to a certain level for here. We try to maintain a certain level of integrity. I think the players, they realize that. It's the reason why we talk to quite a few players, whether we've actually had them on the platform or we get to talk to them, quote, behind the scenes, off the record. It's because, it's called respect. I get accused sometimes of being way too nice and too, sunshine and rainbows. But you know what? Nothing has ever come from being just too negative and dwelling on certain things. And in fact, I come from, a walk of life, as I've mentioned, the officiating and stuff that I do in another sport, is that even when you critique other referees, and I hated, trust me, there were times where I'm like, it was very tough to not say what I am saying as I'm having a beer in front of a TV watching the game here on the podcast when it comes to officiating, because some of the things just drive you insane. But you talk about coachable type items. You just don't tell everybody everything they're bad at. You tell everybody these are things you can improve on. And you know what? It's just a different take on it, where you're just not a jerk, and that's like, the players know. They know if they make a mistake or something like that. Trust me, they feel it just the same way everybody else does, and they might feel it even more because there's pressure of maybe there's a contract and there's money on the line, and that's their job, and they don't know what their future is, or they feel they let down the fans or whatever, or their teammates. We have it easy. We just go and then we wait a week, and then you either complain more or you're happy because they won, because we're spoiled. By the way, I think the Artie Burns play, I might be wrong about this. It may have been earlier in the season. For some reason, I'm thinking Kansas City, but I almost want to say it was the Detroit Lions and Stafford. And I want to say that Stafford had picked up on the zone a couple times, a gap in the coverage there in that game. And that game was so tight. And everybody's like, oh, they should have just beat the crap out of the Lions. And not necessarily true. All of these other teams are, somebody would be like, well, Matt Stafford isn't. You said competent quarterback there, Zach. Matt Stafford gets paid a lot of money because, you know what, it's pro football. He's a professional, and he's pretty darn good at the job that he does. Is he Ben Roethlisberger or Tom Brady or somebody? No, at least not yet. He doesn't have the same type of cast around him, and we all know the Lions haven't been, the greatest of teams over the same period of time like the Steelers have. But I don't want to get too long-winded there either. But that's kind of the case when you're picking on an individual player, when you call something the ultimate team sport. Aside from the quarterback position, I'm not sure that necessarily any other position has that much weight attributed to it other than quarterback. Quarterback is by far most important. I think you would agree with that. So like when you're picking on a corner and you don't know if it's a safety or maybe a slot corner or even a linebacker that was supposed to drop or supposed to cover in a certain spot, I mean, it's hard. It's difficult. You're making certain guesses. And that's why the players also kind of laugh. They roll their eyes. If you at them and mention them in some of these things, the best course is that they're not going to say anything. But you can imagine they're saying something just like we would, sitting there in the living room, laying in bed at night, scrolling through your feed. They probably read things about themselves as well. And, I know I used to do it when there was people reporting on whatever I was doing. And, I just come to a point where I just ignore it because almost nothing good comes from it. Almost everyone, think about the reviews you read, even on a restaurant for Facebook. All people do is say negative things. Or you get to see something that's so above and beyond amazing. It seems like, now it's James Washington's the next one that's getting built up as we finally have, a Hall of Fame game. I know I didn't mention the Hall of Fame game because I really don't care about the Ravens. And, that extra fifth football game isn't any good anyways. And you got Friday Night Lights, so I'm going to come back around because we're both going to be at Friday Night Lights later on in the day on a Friday evening. So God willing, there isn't any traffic in the orange barrels that seem to frequent the Pennsylvania Turnpike headed out that direction. That's pretty crazy. But one of the things is that I want to get back to Demond Patterson. So we talked about like 5 different things there between these topics. And not necessarily just Demond, but also I'm going to bring up Kadri too, because I was saying I wasn't necessarily so impressed with Kadri, but I still have high hopes for him. I want to see him play professional football. I'm glad he's with the team. It doesn't mean I don't like him. And I also understand the reason, one of the roles that he's going to fulfill, and the reason he's on or in training camp is that in the preseason games, when we get actual games, he's going to be one of the returners. He was a heck of a college returner, and that may be how he puts, the food on the table. It may be his meal ticket to being an NFL player. I mean, hello, what? Desmond Howard? I mean, that was, he was great in college, and, he carved his niche out by being what? The only guy to win a Super Bowl MVP as a special teams player, I believe. And so it's one of those things where when you actually get the actual games, and I kind of wanted to ask you this question is, Patterson has stayed healthy. You've had other guys kind of float in and out. You have more of a mix maybe with the ones than you did when camp broke, when they first started. But a lot of times you're going to have guys playing against second-team guys or third-team guys, or a first-team guy, and you got a second-team or third-team guy filling in because somebody else is banged up, needs a day of rest. How much is it that would you say fatigue that factors into the performance of these players? I mean, they're going to be practicing 11 out of the first 12 games, and then they've got a preseason game around the corner. So far, they've only had 1 day off. I think fatigue factors a lot into it, especially when you got anybody who has come through the NFL Combine and NFL Draft process. They haven't even had a break at all year. They're just constant go, versus that's why you see somewhat of a leap when you're talking about second and third year guys, because they get some rest headed into training camp. So how much does fatigue play into all this?
Yeah, I think the pre-draft process and just the draft process in general for rookies and, aspiring NFL players is probably a lot more of a grueling process than a lot of people realize. The minute your college season is done, and let's say you're like a player for Alabama who's just routinely in, the national championship game, almost consistently, it feels like at this point under Nick Saban. A guy who then has been playing football since that July or August when they report to camp. They're playing football until the very end of January, beginning of February. That's a full NFL season right there. And then from that point on, if they're draft eligible, they go directly into the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine game, whatever situation you're going into, you do that. And a little bit after that, you end up going to the Combine, which is a tour de force in and of itself, it might not seem like it, of drills and interviews and meetings and all these things that are just constantly wearing you down. Then after that point, you have your individual workouts, you have your pro days, you have more private meetings, you have more private workouts, you have more official team meetings, informal meetings. Then you have the NFL draft, excuse me. And then from that point on, you go right in the rookie mini camp, and you go right in OTAs. pretty much these rookies, et cetera, are going directly into football for over a year straight. And no one in the NFL, even though you're training during your off time, is going through that type of process. Because once you're in the NFL, like if you're a Ben Roethlisberger or an Antonio Brown or whomever, and you're established in the league, once that season is done, hopefully after, the Super Bowl in February, you have time off to, either be with your family, to go and train with a personal trainer or anything like that, and kind of get back into the swing of things whenever OTAs start, whenever mini camps start, things of that nature. These rookies don't have that opportunity, and I think that's why a lot of times you see that rookie wall, and why you see players that come out swinging, because they're so in the mode of football at that point in time. They finally have gotten acclimated to their team. They've learned the playbook. Things are starting to slow down for them. But the fatigue of, even if it's not physical, even just mental fatigue, and having all these things fly at you consistently, by the time you get to that mid-season point, or even pushing close to the postseason, you're getting run down. No matter how good a shape you're in, no matter how mentally prepared you are for the game of football and what your team is putting at you, you're going to get worn down. And I think, like you said, that's kind of, in my opinion, why you see some of a jump between year one and year two. Because one, you have an entire season, an entire offseason to be with your team. At that point, you also have the ability to go and have a more regular off-season schedule. That's not you pretty much pimping yourself out to a bunch of teams to say, here's why you should draft me. You actually have a routine, consistent schedule. And that's why a lot of times you see players make the jump from year 1 to 2 and then year 2 to 3. And then hopefully from the year 3 to 4. At that point, you get a big contract whenever you're done with that. So realistically, I think that's a very big factor. And even just training camp in general, when you look at it, it's not easy for anyone that's played football at any level, whether it be Pee-wee to the NFL. There's a lot of time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears that get put into that. And realistically, the NFL is the pinnacle of that. I know a lot of old-time fans will say the NFL has got a lot softer with the way training camps are ran, and they're not as hard as they used to be back in the Jack Lambert, Chuck Noll, Terry Bradshaw days. That might be the case, but realistically, you look at it, it's still a lot of work, a long duration going through there. And if you're an undrafted free agent or a late-round draft pick that's fighting and clawing for an opportunity, either with the team that took you or some other team that might pick you up if you end up getting cut, you're putting yourself on the line every single day. And that's why you see guys like Damon Patterson, Jamar Summers, Matthew Thomas, whomever, putting themselves out there to try to get to a place where they're going to be successful and either get picked up by the Steelers or by another team that's going to want to put them on the practice squad or even sign them to an active roster. Who knows? So I think just the fatigue and mentality of it and the physicality of it definitely plays a factor in the long run. And why I think a lot of times you see these veterans sitting out earlier on to get the rookies and the young players more of an opportunity as well, because they need the opportunity more, which again is just more on their plate to keep pushing forward. And yeah, obviously, they're going to handle it and they're going to do it and they're going to try their best, but it's not as easy as fans might like to make it seem.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely some of these guys. I mean, the coaches need to get a look at these guys. Now, in the case of, I think Tomlin in his press conference said something like he hop on the train, jump on the moving train. He didn't even get to really meet like Bucky Hodges or any of these guys that just joined the team. And, that's just how crazy it gets. And you got to think also about the stress of that. Bucky has no idea where he's going. He was probably living out in New Jersey. For the Jets, I believe their camp's out in New Jersey as well, where their team is. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to illustrate. It could be like the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys were like in Southern California. Yeah. These guys have to move around. They're shifting around. They're if you're a rookie and you're coming from, Alabama. Take Josh Frazier. He's been living in Alabama for how long now, and then has to relocate. And you have the age. I had the agents on last year. The guys who worked with MBK, and they're very much involved in that process to try and alleviate as much stress off of the players as well, but it's still there. I mean, you got somebody that's helping you move your stuff and things like that, and then some of these guys have girlfriends, fiancés, wives. Some even have kids, depending on if they're 24-ish, 23, 24. You got guys. Would you say Chukwuma? He's 20. He's young. Yep. He's right there with Juju and the bike. And, I guess you could get a driver's license, but he can't drink yet. But I mean, just think about that, being 20, 21 years old and all of this. I mean, I don't know that I'd be prepared for it in my mid-30s. So, this brings like another good point too, is where you're talking about these guys getting the reps. You're going to have guys that are mixing in now because some players, and we said don't panic about players sitting out of practice or being hurt until you hear some official news. I think the one was B.J. Finney. You were the first and maybe only person that spotted that he actually left the field. Other people, I think, saw it on your Twitter feed and then mentioned it. And then everybody else said, well, Finney's back on the field almost as soon as they finally picked up the fact that he wasn't on the field. It wasn't a big deal. Antonio Brown right now, we don't know what's going on with that. They're going to handle him with the kid gloves because he's a multi-million-dollar athlete that you can't afford to not have on the field. So, and he doesn't need the training camp reps like a Damon Patterson or Kadri Henderson or Tevin Jones or who else am I missing? Trey Griffey or any of these guys that might be playing in their space. And James Washington getting a lot of additional reps too. Ben Roethlisberger, whether he comes out with pads or not, or you cannot read into all these things. I think that's what Kyle Shanahan was kind of getting at here. So I think the big one is, though, I think a lot of fans do not understand or grasp playing time and the depth charts and the spots that are available. And I know I was asked about, I've been asked about guys like Jalen Samuels. I've been asked about Marcus Allen. And this is kind of funny because now we got diamond dollar defenses and stuff. We'll talk about that another day because that's going to be mixing in with these hybrid safety / linebacker / money backer type players where Allen might be seeing some time. Mike Hilton might be seeing some time there too. But I got to throw in, I know I'm all over the place right now, but we have a little bit of notes for today. Terrell Edmonds, Tomlin said strictly strong safety. I mean, he may be making a case to be a starter too because he's been impressive. But your first round picks, these are guys that are taken that may even be, thought of as plug and play. They're going to be starters right away. Maybe even round 2, round 3, depends on the position, depends on the player, depends on the progression. But when you have 4 or 5 safeties on the depth chart ahead of you, like a Marcus Allen, and, somebody asks, hey, what's going on with him? Well, I think he'll be more or less a special teamer this year. They feel it's disappointing. Don't think of that as disappointment. This is a progression. This is a progress. I remember a time when it took, 3-4 years for Cam Hayward to actually start and get some meaningful snaps in regular season games. That used to be the Steeler way all the time. Now, the way that CBA works, rookie contracts work, some of these guys get thrown out there earlier than maybe they should have. If you have the luxury of somebody sitting and waiting and learning, it is a luxury. So I won't necessarily say don't get discouraged if you see somebody like James Washington not starting. Marcus Allen, maybe only a special teams guy, but on maybe 4th or 5th down on the depth chart because of Morgan Burnett, should he be healthy, Sean Davis, Terrell Edmonds, who was the first round pick. You still got Jordan Dangerfield. I'm probably missing somebody else. The Missile. You got him. Yeah, he's been getting a lot of first team reps too, and they need to know what he's got. So this is just a process as far as when it comes to rookies, undrafted free agents, new players, and the way the depth chart shakes out. You don't get a whole lot of surprises like a Mike Hilton who just ends up getting out there right away, or TJ Watt, pretty much a surprise even as a first-round pick, but he was a need. He was drafted as a need, and he was the best player available, which is the mix of two great things. Might happen with Edmonds too. So just your thoughts on that, because I know you're fielding a lot of the same questions.
Yeah, in my mind, I've always appreciated the fact that the Steelers and a lot of teams in the league, not even just the Steelers, go and don't release official depth charts. A lot of times when it comes to these preseason training camp situations, they're just seeing what they have and what can go where. I mean, you have the guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, the entire Steelers offensive line, guys like that are locked into place. You know what you got with them. And for them, it's more so just getting back in the football mindset and just trying to get back out there and make plays. These younger guys, especially the ones that are just new, they've been around for a couple months now, but you still really don't know what you have with them. And that's why you got to see, what can Terrell Edmonds do? And honestly, I wish Morgan Burnett was out there. Him not being out there is really giving the Steelers a firsthand close-up opportunity to see what Terrell Edmonds can do. And, quite frankly, he's running away with it, which, again, it's a knee-jerk reaction. Let's see what he does in games before we start praising him as, the potential savior of the secondary. But realistically, you look at it, these guys are all trying to see where they're going to fit on the team. The Steelers might have drafted somebody that, they thought they knew one thing about, and all of a sudden turns out he can do 15 other things for them that they might not have realized on college tape, or that they saw, a potential interviews or workouts, or even earlier in the summer, and as the playbook develops, as players get more acclimated to what they're doing, you start putting more wrinkles in here and there. You kind of really get a feel for it. So a player right now that might be, fourth or fifth string, and I'm air quoting, he can end up being a second stringer by the time the season rolls around if he proves himself well enough and the Steelers find a way to use him. That's like, I know I fielded a question about my thoughts on the Steelers running back depth heading into the season, and one of the people that was wondering about it was questioning about Jalen Samuels. And, realistically, Jalen Samuels is going to be, a third or fourth string running back, but he might play more than any third or fourth stringer on the team just because of his versatility. You know what I'm saying? So, realistically, it's going to come down to where they can use you, what they can do with you, and how you're going to help the team. And whether that's on special teams with a player like Marcus Allen, who really is, as of right now, isn't going to have a whole lot of opportunities to become a starter this year, at least, seeing what he can do on special teams and making their mark. That's how a lot of players get their mark and become, solid starters. I mean, look at Vince Williams.
Oh, I almost interrupted you and said that too.
yeah, exactly. He's the prototypical guy I look at when it comes to what it means to be a late round pick and just bust your butt and get to a certain point. The guy was nothing but a special teams ace, and then opportunity rang. Lawrence Timmons runs for Miami. All of a sudden, you have Vince Williams coming in as your starting starting just is he Buck or Mac?
You're asking the wrong guy. You know what? In a 3-4, I stopped trying to even make those designations because people always want to argue with you. Oh, who's the Will? Who's this? It's just, you know what? I don't care. There is an inside linebacker. Jesse James. Jesse James is another guy like that. If you go on the offensive side.
Yep, you look at him. You had Heath Miller, coming towards the twilight of his career, but he was still eating up the reps and he was still performing at a high level. So Jesse James had to make his mark on punt coverage, maybe on the front line of a kick return or whatever. Those are opportunities that these guys make, and that might not seem like a big deal, but that's how these players learn and hopefully eventually become contributors on a regular basis on either offense or defense for the Steelers and any team in the NFL. So looking at this point right now and seeing these players that are depth players, or second string or third string or fifth string or whatever, or roster bubble players, the preseason games and practices are an opportunity to come and see what they can do. And that comes back to my original point when you're looking at the evaluation of players. I'm not saying you can't critique players. I'm not saying you can't criticize players, but there's a healthy way of doing it. And I think that's why coaches like Bill Belichick, are the coaches that they are, because they're able to put players in the position to use their strengths, not try to compensate for their weaknesses, which I think a lot of times that becomes an issue with a lot of players. Putting a player in a position to be successful, and that's kind of what the preseason is for. That's what training camp is for. And when you're a late round young player, you don't have a fully developed skill set yet. Even the players that come into the NFL extremely pro ready, they're still not pro ready, so to speak, because that's a really kind of relative term. So I think really you look at it, don't read into the depth chart. I guess that's the take home message is don't read into what you see on the depth chart. Whenever the Steelers do ultimately release their first depth chart of the preseason, heading into the preseason games, that's probably going to change drastically between week 1 and week 4 and the regular season. You're going to have the starters pretty much entrenched, but everything behind that's a grab bag of whatever the flavor of the week is for who was doing well that week in practice. And then the games play a big part, and then you go from there. So don't read into it at this point.
Wasn't it last year Arthur Moats was listed like ahead of someone, and there was like this just, fake outrage. Like that first depth chart, I want to hide. I'm going to go find a rock and just climb underneath it and hide for a few days and not even be on Twitter because everyone's going to freak out. The last part, as we're up against it, I guess the bonus round here is I was having this conversation with some very very intelligent fans as we were waiting for camp to open up the other day, and we were talking about offensive coordinators, we were talking about play calling, we were talking about audibles, Big Ben, and people would talk about Big Ben running his own plays, and that's something that came up because I guess there was a quarterback sneak inserted into training camp the other day, and everybody's like, oh, Big Ben's going to call his own plays. Look, okay, Ben bears, what do you want to say, the responsibility, as much as Todd Haley did, for the success or failure of certain plays, especially when he calls out of a certain play. If he changes a pass to a run or shifts someone to the other side of the formation, whatever hand signals, a hot route, whatever it is, if he changes it, and it's successful, all of a sudden Ben Roethlisberger, just like Peyton Manning, should be an offensive coordinator in the NFL when he hangs up his cleats. But when it fails, Todd Haley is the scapegoat. I wonder if Randy Fichtner is going to get the same level of critique or criticism, because a lot of people still loved Bruce Arians, but do you remember when Bruce Arians was still in Pittsburgh? He was not that as loved. He was about as hated almost as Todd Haley was for some of the things like I think there was a halfback draw called on their own 1 or 2 yard line that resulted in nearly a safety the one time, or maybe it was a safety, or the fact that the defense was always bailing out the offense. You know, Troy Polamalu would have like a pick or a pick six, and you had Jeff Reed and Sean Swedem kicking a lot of field goals in those games. So just kind of your thoughts on Ben Roethlisberger calling his own plays.
Yeah, I think I don't like to call it calling your own plays. I think the way I've always viewed this, realistically, you have a week of preparation leading up into a game. You're game planning for what tendencies the opposing defense does. You're looking to see what personnels they're putting out against what other type of personnel, so you can kind of put wrinkles into your offense for that week to kind of go from it. And, as an offensive coordinator's perspective, they know as well, whether you like Todd Haley or not, people always can question his preparation for games as much as they want to. Realistically, he still knew what he was doing, because he had moments of brilliance and he had moments of where you're sitting there with your jaw on the ground wondering why you're doing
Who
that.
Doesn't, though? I mean, again, it's a guess. It's an educated guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you're going out there, when he calls a play, he's going based off of what he's comfortable calling based on his playbook and what his personnel is, what's previously worked in the game, and then counter putting that against another aspect of what has the defense done in these scenarios, third and short, second and long, for whatever situation. You have these situations you're playing out in your head, and you make a snap judgment, and now you know that they're going to be doing that on the game. So let's say on third and short, routinely they're coming out in a 5-man front doing whatever. They might show blitz from their edges and dropping like their middle back or deep, but all of a sudden you get to the line and Ben Roethlisberger is expecting that, and all of a sudden they change that. And the game and the call that you made going along with the game flow dictated that you made the right call pre-snap. You get to the line, all of a sudden you see the play change. That comes down. Todd Haley can't make that adjustment. That has to be Ben Roethlisberger, and that's why having a competent quarterback, Ben obviously being a future Hall of Famer, we've been fortunate to be able to see him go and make the potentially right call when it's all said and done, because of the fact that he's the only one that can see that. He's the only one that can change that, and if the defense gives him something that he doesn't like based upon what they're playing, because most plays should work all the time if they're ran 11 men properly the way they're supposed to. There is no such thing as a perfect play as far as I'm concerned, because somewhere something gives. But realistically, some plays just don't work against some fronts. And that either requires an audible to flip the play to the other side, or that creates an audible where you can't even run that play because of the slim chance the defense came out in a front that you can't run against. And for Ben to be able to make those adjustments on the line, it's a crapshoot, because the defense could be trying to coax you into making that decision, or you could be making the right call. And when it comes down to it, like you said, Ben gets the praise for saying, wow, you saw him calling the Omahas on the line. And actually, my favorite one, the one that I heard at camp on Monday was Black Randy, which I was pretty excited about.
There was another one, I forgot what it was already, but there was something else too. I picked up on it. I don't remember.
I just enjoy listening to those audible calls. They're funny. But you hear those plays, and it's a crapshoot, because either he's going to make the right call and it's going to end up working in his favor, and the defense is going to be caught off guard, and the offense is going to be in a position to succeed. And if it doesn't work, then, like you said, the offensive coordinator almost always gets the burn, saying, well, why would you run them out there in that situation? Because everybody at home is a better coach than what they have on the team. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, you take that one step further, and you have this brilliant game plan. You've figured out everything. You've watched film the last few games. You've gotten tendencies. You've picked this up from doing a few years playing the same division opponents, and now you're down 21-3. Guess where your game plan goes? Out the window. Yeah, out on I-79 or something. So
and that's the thing. A lot of these plays are scripted from the get-go, and then as the game flow dictates, you got to abandon and adjust.
Exactly. And maybe that's like where that's kind of maybe where some of the criticism comes in for the coaching staff. But you know what? Show me any of the other 31 teams who don't adjust to that. I mean, even the Patriots get it wrong every now and then. Or let's just say everybody remembers Tom Brady not catching that pass and it just slipping through his fingers. Sometimes it's just not executed either by the players on the field. There's a lot of moving parts in this. So we hope we've shed some light on the don't panic. You got all of these hot takes and things and quick sound bites that are out there, tweets and whatnot. Just pump the brakes on that. Try and take a look at the bigger picture and wait until we get some preseason football. So, Zach, thank you once again for being here. This is going to become a regular thing here. We need to get Brian off his butt.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the rest of training camp, and we're all guilty of hot takes. Everybody gets excited from plays, but just know when to consider it a full-on analysis and not just a quick quip.
Yeah, I get excited too. I know you get excited, but I always that was the thing. I said something about Xavier Grimble, and I said, hey, pull that back just a little bit. I know we've said that before, just within the frame of reference, you know what I mean? So, folks, let us know what you got. We've got any more questions, hit us up all over on social media. Zach's out there on Twitter. You could either defend him in some of these Twitter conversations or pick up your axe and grind it too. Same thing for me, although I don't engage as much. So Zach's a little more feistier than I am.
Yeah, I get coaxed more than I should, but that's all right.
All right, everyone. My name's Joe, and if you didn't know already, Zach Meckler. Until next time, be safe, be good. I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.